Vikings, let's win this game.
Attention Vikings fans. The Vikings are putting fans through it again. There's already talk that Minnesota could draft a quarterback with 3,600 yards and 33 touchdowns. And now tension is building as a current player could be heading to join the rival Bears. But the biggest pressure point comes later. A financial decision could squeeze everything, and an internal change could redefine the entire direction of the team. And when all of that hits at once, you already know this is not just another quiet off-season story. Take a look at this. The Vikings quarterback situation is far from settled, and that's not an exaggeration. There's a feeling in the air that the team is trying to protect itself from every angle. And when a franchise starts doing that, it means there's real doubt. Think about it. You've got a young guy who hasn't proven consistency yet. There's a recent injury history hanging over everything. And then suddenly, a different kind of option shows up. More experienced, arriving quietly, but completely shifting the tone of the position. And now the name at the center of all this, Kyler Murray. His arrival wasn't just another move, it was a statement. The team didn't want to simply hand the offense over to J.J. McCarthy after what happened last season. And being completely honest, it makes sense. The performance was way too inconsistent, and that cost games in the NFL. Kyler comes in on a cheap deal, almost laughably cheap for the level of talent he's already shown. That changes the conversation right away, because now it's not about patience anymore. It's about competing right now. It's about winning games immediately, and that raises the level of pressure inside the locker room. But here's the part that makes this feel bigger. This might just be the beginning, because there are already projections looking ahead. Analysts are putting Minnesota right back in the quarterback market in 2027, and not just for any name. The Vikings are being linked to Julian Sayin from Ohio State, a prospect being treated as elite for the next generation. In other words, if this current plan doesn't work, the team might already be preparing to try again. So let me ask you, what does that say about real confidence in the current plan? Because when you bring in Kyler Murray, keep McCarthy, and still get linked to another future quarterback, that's not stability. That's a team searching for answers before the season even settles. And honestly, if Kyler clicks with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson, things change fast, really fast. But if it doesn't, the next decision could carry even more weight. And that's where this whole thing gets uncomfortable, because quarterback questions don't stay small in Minnesota. Now keep this in mind. What showed up in the draft might be one of the biggest steals this team has made, and almost nobody is talking about it yet. And let me know in the comments what you think about this whole quarterback situation, because this definitely splits opinions. Now check this out. While a lot of people were criticizing the Vikings draft, there was a pick right in the middle of it that almost slipped under the radar. And this is the kind of move that, over time, can completely change how a draft class is viewed. Because in the middle of all the doubts, one name started being called a potential steal. And not just by one person. Analysts actually ranked this pick among the best across the entire draft. But it's not flashy. It's not a highlight machine. It's the kind of player that grows inside the team. And when you realize it, he's essential. And here's the name, Caleb Tiernan, a third-round pick, number 97 overall. An offensive tackle from Northwestern with experience, leadership, and one detail that really stands out. He was a team captain. That tells you a lot about the kind of player coming in. But what's even more interesting isn't just the profile, it's the value. Because some people projected him to go earlier, second round, maybe early third, and the Vikings grabbed him almost at the end of that range. In the NFL, that's real value. And when you take a closer look, it starts to explain why Minnesota made the bet. The team had a clear need on the offensive line. A lot of people expected a center early in the draft, and that didn't happen. That was one of the biggest criticisms. But instead, they went with versatility. And Tiernan brings exactly that. He might not have the ideal length to stay at tackle long-term, but he has strength, technique, and intelligence to adapt. There's even projection that he could move inside as a guard, or become that swing tackle who can step in anywhere when needed. And let's be real, in a long season, that matters a lot. Because one injury, one adjustment, anything. And a player like that suddenly becomes crucial. That is how depth turns into survival. Right now, he's competing with names like Ryan Vandermark, Walter Rouse, and Caleb Etienne. Nothing guaranteed, but also nothing out of reach. And there's more. If he develops the way people expect, he could even fight for a starting job in the future. That's not an exaggeration. Now, the real question is this. Did the team pass on solving an immediate need to bet on something more solid long-term? Because if that line doesn't hold up, that entire quarterback discussion we just talked about comes back even stronger. And that's when the pressure really hits. Stay with me, because the next situation hits differently, especially for longtime fans. Quick ask, subscribe to the channel, and jump into the comments. This is a space where fan voices really matter. There are things that hit differently when you've been following this team for years. And this is one of them. It's not just about performance. It's not just about stats. It's about seeing a familiar face, someone who carried important moments, potentially showing up on the other side, because there's movement happening behind the scenes that could take a former Vikings starter straight into the division, and not just anywhere. A rival that loves turning stories like this into fuel, and when you pull that thread, the name shows up. Alexander Mattison. Yes, that same one. The guy who stepped in after Dalvin Cook left. He had his ups and downs, sure, but he handled real responsibility in key moments. Now he could be heading to the Chicago Bears, and not as the main guy, as a rotational piece, possibly RB3, and that says a lot about where he is right now. After his time with the Vikings, he moved around, had modest production, and dealt with a neck injury that basically wiped out a full season. That matters a lot. Still, there's interest. And here's the key point. Chicago doesn't desperately need a running back. They already have DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai handling most of the workload, so bringing in Mattison would be a strategic move. Depth, experience, low cost. But for those who follow Minnesota, it hits deeper. Honestly, seeing someone who wore purple and gold potentially strengthening a division rival always feels a little off. There's no way around that. At the same time, it shows how fast the Vikings' backfield has changed. Right now, the team is built around Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason. They also added youth in the draft with Demon Claiborne, who brings serious speed. So the space Mattison once had is just gone. That's the NFL. One year you're the starter, the next you're fighting for a role somewhere else. And if he does land in Chicago, that could turn into one of those stories you only fully understand when the teams face each other. Imagine that first carry against Minnesota. Yeah, that would feel weird. So let me ask you, how do you feel about that possibility? I want to hear your take in the comments because this one splits the fan base. But hold on, because the next situation involves big money, tough decisions, and could reshape the entire offense. Now pay attention to this, because when money enters the conversation in the NFL, everything changes. It's not just about performance anymore. It's not just about fit on the field. It's about direction. It's about franchise-level decisions. And the Vikings are stepping right into that moment because there's a scenario being discussed that could put the team in a very uncomfortable position. And it all revolves around that same name we mentioned earlier, Kyler Murray. But now it's not about him arriving. It's about how much it might cost to keep him. He's on a one-year deal. Cheap. Extremely cheap for his talent level. But if he fits into Kevin O'Connell's system, everything changes. Because productive quarterbacks become priority. And priority comes with a price. Some projections are already putting that number around $50 million per year, and that's where the problem starts, because the team already invested heavily in Justin Jefferson, and keeping two massive contracts like that at the same time, it's not simple. In fact, it's nearly impossible in the traditional sense. So here's the real question. Is it worth paying that kind of money for a quarterback who still needs to prove consistency in this system? Honestly, that decision could define the next few years, because if Kyler delivers at a high level, you can't just let him walk. But if you overpay, it affects the entire roster. It's that fine balance that separates competitive teams from ones stuck in cap trouble. And there are comparisons being made across the league. Big contracts that worked, and others that became problems quickly. The Vikings can't get this one wrong. Not with this roster, not with this window. And there's another important detail. People around football truly believe in the pairing of Kyler Murray and Kevin O'Connell. There's real confidence he can perform in the right system, but believing is one thing. Paying is something else entirely. And in the end, it all comes down to one simple thing: production on the field. If he plays at a high level, this becomes a must decision. If not, the team could move on and reset the cycle again. And that's when that future draft conversation starts making even more sense. Now stay with me, because what's happening off the field inside the organization might be even more impactful than all of this. There's movement happening away from the field that could impact everything we've talked about so far, and that's not an exaggeration. When a team's leadership structure changes, the effects spread everywhere, because the Vikings are officially searching for a new general manager. And this isn't just a name change, it's a shift in vision, in philosophy, in how this roster will be built moving forward. And here's the name that recently left that role: Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah. His departure caught a lot of people off guard, especially since it hadn't been long since he signed an extension. It felt like stability. It felt like continuity. And suddenly, it was over. In his place, Rob Brzezinski stepped in as interim, holding things together through the draft. And now that the draft is done, the team has officially started the process of finding a permanent replacement. And this is where the stakes really show up, because it's not just about who takes the job, It's about what kind of leader they're looking for. They mentioned someone decisive, someone with a clear vision for roster building, someone who can align the entire organization. That's not a small detail. That's a complete reset in direction. Honestly, this might matter more than any single signing, because a general manager defines the path. Who comes in, who leaves, how money is spent, what identity the team builds, and after a season missing the playoffs, it's clear they want something different. At the same time, you can't ignore the talent already on this roster. So the real question is, will the new leader adjust what's already here, or start tearing it down and rebuilding? Because depending on that answer, everything we talked about, from quarterback to offensive line to the backfield, could change direction. That is why this search matters so much. It touches everything. And that's when you realize the Vikings aren't just trying to improve, they're trying to redefine themselves. And when a team enters that kind of phase, it either takes a leap forward or loses its way. And in the middle of all this, you can feel the Vikings are at a turning point. This isn't just one decision. It's everything happening at once, pulling the team in different directions. There's uncertainty at the most important position on the field. There's a new bet trying to raise the level of the offense. There's a draft pick who could become a key piece down the line. There's a former player who could end up strengthening a division rival. And now, a major leadership change that could reshape the entire future of the franchise. This isn't routine. This is about identity. Either this team finds itself now, or it enters a cycle of doubt that can take years to escape. And I'll say this. Looking at everything together, if the right decisions are made now, this roster still has the strength to compete. There's talent, there are key pieces, there's a foundation to build on. But if they get these next steps wrong, things can fall apart fast. Because in the NFL, you don't get much time to correct your course, so tell me, how do you see this moment for the Vikings? Stay tuned. SKOL Vikings, let's go.